The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest stories in the NBA.
The Lakers no longer have that center that they traded for.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast.
You hear about this news, and what's your initial reaction to the spiked Williams trade?
It was incredible because these things don't happen. Like, I mean, like to have a full-on trade rescinded never takes place. Like it's one thing for a player to fail a physical or to have questions from a physical, and the deal ends up getting amended because the team sending out said player can offer some type of concessions to ease the receiving team's concerns or just make it worth their while. Or sometimes you take on a player and you know that there are physical issues, but you want the player bad enough and you're confident enough to say, all right, this is fine. This is basically what we expected. To actually have the deal fall apart altogether, that is exceptionally rare, which leads me to believe when we eventually find out what was going on with Mark Williams, and side note, I feel terrible for Mark Williams because this is the type of thing that you might as well be carrying around a sign that says damaged goods.
I feel bad for him for the ridiculous statement the Hornets put out afterwards about how excited they were to have him back.
Right. It feels like whatever is going to come out is pretty dramatic, just because it would take a lot for the Laker. It would take, I don't mean dramatic like when, just to clarify, like when the Lakers discovered the heart issue with Romy.
No, I know what you mean.
This has to be something that is pretty dramatic, for lack of a better word, to make the Lakers decide this player that we were A, super enthusiastic about, and B, aware had injury histories, that it was worse than we imagined, having already gone into this knowing there would be a certain amount you have to accept with a player with that. He's played 80-ish games over three years. You have to expect there's going to be a couple things that come up. You're like, well, I'm not wild about that. But I mean, just, you have to.
Right.
I imagine it's probably a pretty dramatic thing.
Well, it's also too, it's like, it's interesting. Like when you look at I think sort of the interpretations of this, the Lakers are obviously looking long-term, and it reminds me a little bit about what some of the consensus was about Andrew Bynum when he was drafted, that like his knees and like the shape of his legs and all this stuff were basically like a time bomb. And it turned out whatever it was they were worried about was accurate. Like his health pushed him out of the league. I don't know if what the Lakers found here, which reportedly was not the back injury, which I think a lot of people were suspecting that it would be. Like this is Mark Williams's back problems, which reportedly kept him from working out as much, and all these, like that would be the thing that would be the giant red flag. That apparently wasn't it. And the Lakers are obviously looking at not just, is he going to be healthy for the rest of this season, or is he going to be healthy for the rest of next season? But when you trade for a 23-year-old player with the expectation you're probably going to have to sign him pretty quickly after this year, or potentially at least, Ramona Shelburne, for example, noted that they went over these medicals pretty carefully.
Yeah.
And just weren't able to kind of get past like the issues with like long-term health, whether that's a year down the road, 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road. But he could be healthy for the rest of this season, and people are going to look at it and say, like, what were the Lakers thinking? He could be healthy next season. I feel bad for, I agree with you. I feel bad for the guy because now everybody's going to be sort of staring at him, waiting for, this inevitable, horrible injury to
for him to
just
vaporize
so
or something under content. Like I sent out a tweet at Cam Brothers, like, it turns out that Mark Williams has actually been 3 kids inside an incredibly realistic bodysuit. Like, again, something just insane to make the Lakers. The point that you bring up about seeing this as much a long-term as short-term investment for a guy that is only 23 and was playing at the time that the Lakers traded for him. They were willing to initially invest in a center that they knew had health issues, but it's the type of center Luka wanted. Mm-hmm. So for them to turn around and decide we cannot feel comfortable counting on this guy long-term, again, whatever is going to eventually come out, I would be surprised if it's not a pretty pronounced, very specific thing that they are concerned about in terms of Mark Williams' long-term future. Like, this is not a gut feeling. I don't know about this. Right. Yeah. No, or also I doubt this is a last-minute skittishness thing. I imagine this is something very specific.
Not to get too deep in the weeds, but if the Lakers fail him for medical stuff and the Hornets think it's BS, there are mechanisms for these types of things. Like, you can't just cold foot a physical.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. Imagine going to the big game this Sunday. That's what a lot of the people around me here on Radio Row are going to do, and the fans who are coming to New Orleans. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have time searching. Inspiration makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and take the work on tickets. Gametime. Download Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
The Bucks set quite a few different season high marks in this game against the Sixers.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast.
Frank, tonight we saw the Bucks defeat the 76ers by 8 points. Much needed victory against the 76ers. Was the second Bucks win in their last 7 games. Now, the defense was looking very optional in this game, and at certain parts in like the third quarter, I had some concerns. Like, is this going to end up like that Grizzlies game we saw like last week, where the Bucks offense eventually dried up, and then without being able to get the stops, they just got ran out the gym late? And with no Giannis in this game, the ask of Dame was going to be really high, and he seemed like he was up for the challenge in this one. Season high, 43 points for Dame, 8 boards, 8 assists. Gary Trent Jr. also played a really big part in this game. A season high from him, 23 points. But let's start with the Dame side of things. What did you see from Dame tonight that you thought helped propel the Bucks to victory?
Well, 8 out of 15 threes certainly helps.
It helps.
And, I think when we saw the Giannis news, I think the obvious first thought is like, well, Dame, you got to show that you still got that superstar card, because the offensive burden in particular is just going to be really heavy on him to kind of lead the way. And obviously, he said this, he's not used to doing this, right? He did it basically his career in Portland. So, we've seen the stats, right? That he's certainly, as a scorer, he's able to take it up to another level when Giannis misses out. So I think between Dame and, Bobby's a guy who over the years, I think has always been, very effective during the regular season whenever Giannis is out. Like, last year he was a 20 and 10 guy, when Giannis missed games. And so I think what we saw from Bobby really all 3 games since he's come back from, missing time following his grandmother's passing. He's looked like a guy who really wanted to get back on the floor, and has played at a high level, which they desperately needed. So yeah, I mean, I think with Dame, I thought the most encouraging thing was, the Sixers at various points did what we're always worried about teams doing and what has been very effective against the Bucks, which is, doubling him really far away from the basket. I mean, we saw Joel Embiid in the first half pressuring him and trapping him, like 30, 35 feet from the basket. And that's where the Bucks, like so often, it doesn't seem like they have an answer. You take the ball out of Dame's hands and then the ball doesn't find its way back to him, or, the offense kind of just gets gummed up. And especially without Giannis. Yeah, exactly. Like it's the obvious game plan, right? Like if you or me, we're given the task of like, how do you prepare a team to go against the Bucks? It's like, first off, just try to pressure Dame up and down the floor, throw that extra body at him and make other guys beat you, especially without Giannis. And, I thought that was obviously kind of the most encouraging thing, because, Maxey and Embiid had such hot starts. What Maxey had, did he have 20 in the first quarter? Yeah. It felt like, oh man, Maxey's on a heater. And with Dame, it was a little bit more slow and steady in terms of the scoring. So I think just credit to him for kind of just, kind of staying with it. And, 44 minutes from him, it's weird looking at the box score. Ryan Rollins only played 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Dame played 44, which obviously is not typical that he's playing that kind of minute load, especially in a game that the Bucks kind of took control of, late in the third quarter. And they extended that a pretty big lead that, the final score was a bit flattering to the Sixers. So yeah, I think it's a kind of a hat tip game to Dame, and kind of a game where you say like, all right, Dame, that was great. Now you got to do it for the next week or so to get this team, through to the All-Star break. And obviously no rest for the weary. 44 minutes, on the first night of a back-to-back with the Warriors coming to town, looking a bit energized as well. But yeah, I think just huge credit to Dame for stepping up to the challenge and, outdueling Maxey and, being the driving force of a Bucks win that they really needed, after the Friday game, which was a huge letdown in Atlanta that they should have won. Tonight, they didn't have the same letdown, and obviously, cool to do it. And given the circumstances, matinee on Sunday at home, but big time opportunity to show that, okay, this team can get back on track. And, it all started with Dame.
It truly did. And you brought up just how the Sixers were playing him with the aggressive trapping and trying to get the ball out of his hands. I love that he was able to continue to be aggressive throughout the game. In situations where he was not getting trapped, he did not hesitate to take advantage of that and try to make something out of, like, being able to drive to the basket. He got so many drives to the basket tonight that opened things up, not only for himself, but for his teammates. And that's been an aspect of his game that I just give him a lot of credit for. Ahead of this game, Doc Rivers apparently told Doc, like, I'm going to need you to be an aggressive scorer and an aggressive playmaker in this game. And that's always a really hard line to draw. Like when we have the conversations about the Bucks offense stalling, a lot of times it comes down to some ISO ball. And when you have players like Dame and Giannis, where it's like, and ball in their hand, I'm sure they like their chances to score just about every single time down the court. So you have to find that right balance of being aggressive, but also making sure you're setting your teammates up, because his gravity opens up so much for everyone else. So I love seeing how active he was at getting his teammates involved. That's been the case for like the last couple of weeks for Dame, I feel like, of just being really intentional about that, being aggressive, putting up 15 threes tonight. He made 8 of them, as you mentioned. And Gary Trent Jr. also put up 15 threes in this game. He made 7. I believe I saw a stat from Nathan that just said like, this is the first game in Bucks history where you had 2 teammates on the Bucks score at least 7 threes apiece. That in itself was just like crazy to watch the scoring display. Like Gary Trent Jr., like 7 to 20 from the field overall, 7 to 15 from 3, 23 points. But one thing about this team going forward without Chris Middleton on it, the shot creators and the guys who are going to be able to put those buckets up are really important. Bobby also played a part in that as well. But just seeing Gary Trent Jr., Bobby Portis come off the bench, give him that scoring punch, and really help push that score up, I thought was also a really key part for the Bucks in this victory today.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't realized it in the game, but Gary Trent, 15 threes attempted, matching Dame. I'm guessing you haven't had teammates hit 15 threes combined, and you probably haven't had teammates take 30 threes combined. But Dame, obviously he takes really hard threes because he's just, one of the great shot makers in the history of the sport. He had some really deep kind of Dame level threes. I thought Gary was just kind of taking his rhythm threes. He obviously is a guy who doesn't have a great, dribble drive game, but is enough of a threat there that I think teams he's able to at least get a defender sort of taking a step back. Whereas for instance, AJ Green, I think hasn't gotten to that level. So Gary, 0 for 5 on twos of this game, only 7 of 20, right? So not the most efficient game.
Right.
Felt like he had a lot of shots, but 23 points on 20 shots, a little more like Raptors, Gary Trent, 33 minutes, in terms of playing a big minute load. And, some of his usual kind of adventures in transition. I thought he had to be better than Malik Beasley in transition coming into this season. He is not, Camille.
Yeah.
He is just as adventurous. It's kind of it's funny how often he has to go to a pump fake off a 2-footed jump stop on a breakaway. He just does not have sort of the confidence in his athleticism and physicality as a finisher, but he's at least aware of it. And tonight, obviously, just some of that 3-point shooting again. You saw it in the second quarter in the Friday game against Atlanta when they went on that huge run, and he was a big part of that. Just feels like there have been so many games where the second unit comes in and Gary Trent is the guy just hitting 2-3 triples in a short span just to blow a game wide open. And that was exactly what happened late in the third quarter of this one. So yeah, I mean, he's a luxury to have, coming off the bench, just being able to be that explosive scorer. And, we talk about it, how it seems like one of him or AJ seems to have a good shooting night every night. That's the benefit of having both of them, is you have a little bit of, insurance against sort of any one guy being in a slump. And, tonight, not a monster night from AJ, but 11 points on 7 shots from him. He was plus 28 in 25 minutes, Gary plus 10 in 33 minutes. The bench was sort of the plus minus all-stars. Bobby was 18 and 13 and 5 assists, 0 turnovers, plus 13 in 30 minutes. So shout out to Bobby again. We've seen him put up a lot of these, you never thought of Bobby as a passer before, but he's had a bunch of these 5 assist type games this year, which has been a big help. And I think the other thing too that I would just call out, I mean, Camille, we've talked a lot about this season, the math problem the Bucks have had.
Mm-hmm.
Other opponents, again, they've, up until the recent stretch, they had been a really good defensive rebounding team. They had a lot of wobbles, especially on that road trip when Bobby was out. But even though they've been a good defensive rebounding team, they've been the worst offensive rebounding team. They had one game. They had one game this season against Brooklyn, which they lost in early January, where they had a 30.2% offensive rebound rate. Basically the league leaders in offensive rebound rates as teams are all the top few, I think, are above 30%. The Bucks had one game all season that they were 30% or more, and they were barely over it. Tonight, 37% offensive rebound rate, 19 offensive rebounds. Bobby with 7 offensive rebounds. Brooke with 7 offensive rebounds. This was finally a game where the Bucks had the math benefit. They took 105 shots from the field. The Sixers took just 89, and the free throws were essentially a wash. So this was finally a game where it's oh yeah, we had way more shots than the other team. And again, the other team just has to make so many more shots in order to be competitive or have a big turnover, turnover advantages is part of that. So yeah, I think this was just one of those games where, finally the math sort of worked more in the Bucks' favor. And a little weird, they only won by 8 in a game where they hit 24 threes and had a turnover advantage and all that. But again, end of the day, just try to claw out wins any way you can until you hopefully get Giannis back, and hopefully that's sooner rather than later. But we know they're gonna have to keep doing this for at least the next week or so.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought up the offensive rebounding point of it. I think they got like 5 or 6 of those boards in one possession, but that does not matter. I appreciated the hustle that they were playing with and being that engaged and going after those 50-50 balls. I know Bobby remarked that one thing that he noticed when he was away from the team, grieving with his grandmother, was just like we needed to be better on the glass, and that was a point of emphasis for him coming back to make sure that he was also someone attacking the glass.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on all the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip or want to go bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting features because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. And I'm looking at tonight's matchup between the Bucks and the Warriors. Everything looking good in Golden State, and FanDuel likes them on the road. The Warriors favored by 6 over the Bucks without Giannis. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Why Jimmy and Steph made it look easy. Let's start with what Jimmy Butler brings to the table that Andrew Wiggins does not. And I was slightly skeptical. I'll call myself an idiot right now. I don't know ball. I'll say it. I'll scream it to the heavens. Kolsky was the one, as a former Bulls guy. You know, Kolsky had seen many, many Jimmy Butler games. I, meanwhile, was working in the Bay Area, and my knowledge of Jimmy Butler was through highlights and the occasional times that we saw a team from the Eastern time zone take on the Golden State Warriors. I mean, typically I was like hopping on Bart when, he was playing for either the Wolves, the Heat, or the Chicago Bulls. You're not watching a ton of Eastern time zone games. And then the seasons that he did go off, specifically 21-22, when he brought them to that Eastern Conference championship against the Boston Celtics, that was the year, we finally started dissecting that on the radio, because we were going to see whether it was Boston or whether it was Miami in the finals. And I guess 2 years have gone by, and I forgot how high we all were on Jimmy Butler then. But erroneous, irrelevant. I was slightly skeptical, and not necessarily due to the play from Jimmy. We all know what he can do as a player. It's more so the timing. 35 years of age, ankle issues, depending on who you ask, attitude issues, although he seems pretty chill to me, quite frankly. I get a beer with him. And he came with a coffee with him, and came with a very steep price tag. Very steep. But let's forget the price tag. That's for down the road. It ain't my money, and they made it work for now. Let's talk about how Butler impacts this team. He's almost the antithesis of Andrew Wiggins. Andrew was safe. You knew what you were getting. He's durable. He's not causing any issues. His contract isn't going to be a reason your franchise falls off a cliff. But while he was safe, the team as a whole was subpar with Andrew Wiggins at the number 2. Not Wiggins' fault by any means. And the reason it worked out so well in 21-22 with Wiggins as a number 2 is because you had multiple number 2s. You had Klay Thompson. You had Jordan Poole. You had Draymond Green being the cerebral number 2. You put all those things together and it worked. But the team they have right now, it did not work with Wiggins at the number 2. And to the Heat fans watching, you're getting a good one, man. You're getting a good one. But I saw one game from Jimmy Butler. It'd been like a month since he'd played. Played like 5 games since Christmas. And I am already convinced that Jimmy's game is going to work better in this system. Disclaimer, it's the honeymoon phase. We all know how the honeymoon phase goes. But we're also in a phase where we got a guy that, like I said, was out of shape. He'd played 5 games since Christmas and came in and balled. 25 points in his first game for the Warriors. Got to the free throw line 13 times and nailed 11 of them. Hop in the comments on today's show. We'll be featuring some of your comments. And be sure to join the community with a subscribe wherever you get your audio podcasts and on YouTube. Jimmy's first basket was a thing of beauty. a backdoor alley-oop. And we've seen Wiggins score off the backdoor cuts. I mean, specifically, I can think of a few in just the last few weeks where he went backdoor and laid it up and in. So not trying to slander his game by saying backdoor alley-oop. When's Wiggins doing that? But I think that play reiterated that Jimmy is going to be much better at making things happen without the ball in his hands than Andrew Wiggins. Fair? Wiggins, to me, was more of like a finesse guy, and they needed another junkyard dog. Wiggins was great from three, 38%, but with no Clay and no Poole, this team didn't have the manpower to win that way anymore. The shooting threes at a 50-time clip per game, it was way too feast or famine. You just did not have the manpower to win consistently that way. Now, we've seen them beat Oklahoma City twice. They could win games, but they weren't going to do it consistently. When the playoff comes around, you have to do it every single game. Steve Kerr called Jimmy Butler a lion. I mean, we're replacing finesse with fire here. We're getting a dog. We need more dogs. And now you have that second option that may only shoot 1 or 2 threes per game. He's on the attack at all times, which is going to lead to kickouts, better rhythm looks. And Butler has always been a better assist player than Andrew Wiggins. I mean, you go through the numbers. You got, 5 last night? He'll get you 8. He'll get you triple doubles from time to time. Like, he does it all. Is he great at anything? I mean, he's great at leading. He's great at being competitive. He's great at finishing around the basket. He's great at a ton of things. But specifically, he's great at the little things. And you add all the little things up together, and it makes a complete basketball player that just changes the game with Steph Curry on the team. And the secret sauce we've talked about all season, the Warriors win every single game when they have more than 30 assists. They had 34 in Butler's first game in a Warriors jersey. Coincidence? I don't think so. A lot of it has to do with everyone was making shots. Pods was hot. Quentin Post was balling. Steph was 8 of 16, 50% from deep. Buddy was knocking down threes. That does help. But I think we're going to see that secret sauce on the menu more often moving forward. 25-point Jimmy in his first game in weeks. Sleepwalked his way to 25 points. He said after the game that he was out of shape. It took him a while to get into it. This is a new system. Granted, it has some similarities to the Heat, but brand new team. And he comes out the first game and sleepwalks his way to 25 points. I asked on the last show, like, how much better is he than Andrew Wiggins? That was my big holdup with the trade. It was like, okay, right now, yes, your team is better, but you're bringing in a 35-year-old, and the elasticity and the muscles or whatever you want to get into with aging athletes, like the bodies break down quicker than they did at one point. And that to me was the main reason that I said, are you getting that much better? Because you're getting Andrew Wiggins every single night. How often are you going to get Jimmy Butler? I got a call from a buddy that's a Jimmy Butler stan. He's from Milwaukee. He's a Bucks fan, but Butler was his favorite player at Marquette, and outside of his Bucks, my friend's favorite team is whoever Jimmy is on. He's followed him throughout his career. He's got his jersey from 22jerseys.com, whatever it may be. He's got them in every form possible, even all-star jerseys. And he was like, dude, you need to get hyped. No more going on this Locked On Warriors show and saying you're skeptical. You need to change your tune right now so you don't sound like a moron. And I said, all right, give me the reasonings. He's like, dude, Butler was scoring 17 and didn't even want to be in Miami. He was just running through the motions. And he's a competitor. So Butler's always trying. But that extra juice that he brings, he wasn't bringing it for a team that didn't fully value him. He knew that Miami wanted him gone. Whether Pat Riley would say it or not, he knew that that marriage was unsalvageable. Divorce papers had been filed a minute ago. Warriors, meanwhile, were almost desperate for Jimmy. He knows they need him. They paid Butler. The Warriors paid Butler like they need him. Jimmy Butler's done a lot in his career. He's never won a championship. He's now playing with Steph Curry, a guy that's got 4 rings, 4 of them. He's taking notes. He's giving notes. He's competitive. He wants to win. So I asked about the ankle and his age. And before I could even get through my objections, the dude told me, his name's Seamus, by the way. Seamus. Guy could get to the charity stripe 10 times with a bad knee, and he's best with shooters around him. And I'm thinking, all right, Curry, Buddy, Pods, Post, it's going to help those guys significantly. Case in point, Jimmy is smart. He's going to make the right play. And I think Steve Kerr said it best after the game. All the attributes and talent that Jimmy Butler brings to this team, the one attribute that stands out the most, willing passer, a good passer. That's what this offense needed. Inside out. We've been saying it for a while. We thought the inside out was from a back-to-the-back basket guy, a back-to-the-basket big guy. We thought it was Vooch. Thank God it's not Vooch. And it's Jimmy Butler, because he could play inside out and can really do it all from the perimeter, from the high post. He will make passes everywhere, hard screens. Love what I saw. I gave him an A-plus performance from his first game, where the Warriors were down 24 and ended up beating the Bulls by 21.